This is Pet Life Radio. Let's talk pets.
Welcome back to Covered in Pet Hair. I'm your host, Isabel and today I have the pleasure of having a drink and a chat with a pet parent, an entrepreneur. She's an animal rescue advocate and volunteer. She's a cocktail connoisseur and a coffee lover. She's an introvert, Baltimorean. Is that something that you are allowed to say for Baltimore people, or is that like frowned upon?
Baltimorean would be the nicer way.
Yeah, is it derogatory?
Yeah.
Baltimorean is a derogatory way of describing Baltimore natives. I have always heard that because one of my best friend's husbands is a Baltimorean and he refers to himself as such. So I was trying to make sure that that was not derogatory, but I failed, obviously. She is wife to Tim, dog mom to a pit mix named Penny, who she found in an alley in Baltimore, and to Nino, also a pitty, who she adopted from a shelter and is a little scaredy, fearful little buddy that she just recently talked about in a podcast that she did. Speaking of, she is the founder of the Believe in Dog podcast and co-host of the Alternative Dog Moms podcast. She's creator of the Dog Health Journal. Her name is Erin Scott. Welcome, Erin. It's so good to have you on the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. And I did not mean anything by calling you a Baltimorean. Baltimore people are some of my favorite people. I went to the University of Maryland in College Park. I spent a lot of time in Baltimore, Fells Point, you name it. I had such a good time. Halloweens that I may barely remember. I love Baltimore. So I'm so excited to have you here on the show. So before I go any further and get into your history and your life story and how you ended up with so many podcasts and so many pet-related projects, I want to introduce our drinking game today. So anybody participating in our drinking game, anytime you hear this word, make sure you take a drink of whatever you're enjoying, but please be sure you're over 21 to partake, never drink and drive, and always drink responsibly. So what are you having tonight, Erin?
This is a cocktail. I don't know if my husband invented it, but he certainly turned me on to it. So it's 2 ounces of Screwball peanut butter whiskey, plus 2 ounces of Mr. Black coffee liqueur. And then you whip some heavy cream and pour on top with a dash of cinnamon.
Wow. This is why I like Baltimore people. Because y'all know how to drink. Like,
that is true.
And y'all know how to cook. Because Baltimore has some of the best food in the world. So I am so excited. Does he have a name for this drink?
We just call it the coffee drink.
The coffee drink. I love it. A coffee drink is always a good idea. Well, I'm actually having a white sangria that I made with some pomegranates, some Cointreau, some leftover Gewürztraminer that I had that was a little bit too sweet to drink on its own. So I decided to make a sangria out of it. So cheers. Thank you again for being on the show. Here's to you and to Tim for making an awesome cocktail. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is your love of dog. You aptly named your podcast, your first podcast, the Believe in Dog podcast. You believe so strongly in the connection between humans and dogs that the first game we're going to play tonight is The Dog Bond. And it's actually based on a study that was highlighted on the website aspenideas.org, The Mysterious Mind of a Dog. So we're going to talk about just connections that humans and dogs share. Are you ready to play?
Of course.
All right, let's do this. Okay, so dogs increase our empathy. True or false?
True.
Absolutely. And it's actually studied by a professor named Alexandra Horowitz. She's a dog cognition scientist and professor at Columbia University. Second one is bonding with dogs is akin to bonding with a newborn. True or false?
True.
It is true. All of that releases oxytocin from everybody involved. And this study actually said, or this session in that they have highlighted here says that dogs actually kind of hijacked that connection between humans and newborns, and they kind of look at us and they gaze in our eyes, kind of like Newborns do, so that we can release oxytocin and want to pet them more.
It works.
It does work. All right, this is kind of funny, but I promise you this is science. Human excrement played a major role in the domestication of dogs.
I'll say true, but I don't know why.
It is true. According to Brian Hare, professor of evolutionary anthropology out of Duke University, human feces is like an energy bar for a wolf. It's cooked, digested, it doesn't run away, and it has more protein than chicken.
Did not know that.
So all of the moms that have dogs and kids and have been potty training, and the dog wants to get to the poop before you're able to throw it out, the dog knows. It's chock full of nutrients.
It's evolutionary.
It's evolutionary, guys. All right, dogs dream like we do. True or false?
True.
It is true, but guess what? We haven't been able to study dogs' dreams like we do in humans, so we have no idea what they dream about. What do you think they dream about?
Oh, I always think Nino is dreaming about like chasing squirrels or having his ball and like having 18 balls in his mouth at the same time.
I love that. So I have a 15-year-old dog, Titan, who definitely doesn't remember his dreams if he's dreaming at all. And I think that he probably just dreams about like the kids dropping food all day and him picking it up, because that's what's keeping him young at heart, is my kid's messiness. All right, next one. Sleep is just as important for dogs as it is for people. True or false?
Oh, absolutely true.
It is true. According to the same expert, Brian Hare, the activation that happens at night for dogs helps them consolidate memories and learn new things. So everybody needs to get their sleep, not just our toddlers, not just us, but also our dogs, which a lot of people are like, oh, they don't have sleep cycles, they don't need to sleep, but they do. All right, this one's really interesting. So the guilty look, you know, the guilty look we see on social media of dogs that have gotten into something they weren't supposed to get into, is an expression of true guilt. True or false?
False.
It is false. Tell me why.
Well, I've heard that they don't really understand guilt, that it's just they're getting yelled at, so they're looking like they're getting yelled at.
That's exactly right. So the same professor, Alexandra Horowitz, she says that they know we're upset and reacting to our
emotional
reaction,
state.
right?
Yeah.
Yes. So that's why they are looking all sad, not because they're recognizing that they violated any kind of rule, because they're really not capable of really understanding our rules.
Right.
All right. Perfect. Great job. Awesome job. 100 over 100. Okay. So you refer to yourself often as a reluctant pet parent, a reluctant dog owner.
Yes.
So your husband was the one who wanted a dog. You talk about the story of him always wanting a female brindle pit bull, which is so cute, because he had met one earlier in life and he just said, like, that's going to be my dog one day.
Yeah.
So what about dog ownership made you reluctant?
Well, I had some funny experiences with dogs in my life. My parents never really let us have any pets. And the impression that I got was like, well, pets are kind of a pain, or, you know, they're annoying. It's a lot of work, you know, and so that was what I thought. And then I had this friend growing up, and every time I went over her house, she would be like, don't get the dog excited because he'll piddle. And I had never had dogs. I didn't know what piddle meant. And it meant pee on my foot, which I learned
submissive urination, right?
Yeah. Like it was a little Cocker Spaniel that would like get so excited. And so then I'm like, oh, this is gross. Now my socks are all wet, you know? And then when I was a teenager, I dated this guy, and they lived kind of like near these woods. Like they had all this wooded property. And every time I would go there, like the dog would just come like barreling out of the woods, always covered in mud. And, you know, I'm a teenager. I got like some cute little outfit on, you know, and the dog would just like jump on me, like knock me down. I'm covered in mud. And I was like, oh, you know, so if they're not peeing on you, they're like getting you muddy. That was like my impression of dogs. So I didn't know about this whole thing.
And what do your parents say now, who never let you have a dog growing up, now that you're like obsessed with dogs?
Yeah. I think they're surprised. I don't know. I think they always seem to be surprised by me.
I love that. Well, that's not a bad thing. You keep them on their toes. All right. So you founded the Believe in Dog podcast after a significant life experience.
Several, yeah.
Several. You mentioned that you are a breast cancer survivor.
Yes.
And how did that play into your wanting to tell the stories that you tell on your podcast?
Well, Penny, who is snoring next to me right now, she was a really big part of me getting through breast cancer treatment. Everybody meant well, but there's something about that look that people get in their eye. And I hated that look. I didn't want to be looked at differently. I just wanted to go to work. I just wanted to do my thing. Like, I know I had this thing to deal with, but for some reason, it was very hard for me to take that in. And yet when I was with her, I could just be me and we could just drive around. I could jam out to Jane's Addiction for the 475th time, and nobody cared if I'm listening again. And we could just have a good time. And I was just me and they were just she could just let me be me. And there wasn't any of that emotional heaviness when I was with her. And, a lot of this was bouncing around in my head for a long time. And I had some friends who were doing a podcast and I sat down with them one day and I was telling them about this, wouldn't it be cool to sit down and hear the stories of how dogs have helped people through a hard time or what, dogs have inspired people to do. And they're like, why don't you just start your own podcast? And I had never thought of this before, but part of having the breast cancer experience honestly just made me think just how short life is. And I remember the first time the doctor was telling me the diagnosis and I looked at her and I said, I don't have time for this. I got stuff to do. And I remember my mom going, what do you have to do? And I think I knew I was supposed to be doing something else. And so because of the impact that dogs have made in my life and just of people who I know personally, as well as people I follow, whether it's on social media or what have you, I was people have a lot of really interesting stories and maybe I can be part of telling those stories. So that's kind of how that all came about.
We were just talking about how I feel like you're the Oprah of the dog podcasting world because
I will take that a compliment.
So you have such a soothing your voice right now is very casual, we're getting to know each other, but your voice on your podcast, especially your first episode where you tell the story of how you became inspired and you share a lot of hardships you've been through, your voice is so on point that honestly it sounds like an audiobook. It sounds like you're reading a story. So the day that you write down your story and share the Believe in Dog podcast book, you should read the audiobook because you have the perfect voice for that. Well, tell me, who is your favorite guest you've interviewed in your what do you have almost 60 episodes? So
yeah,
if you were to have to narrow it down, gosh, who's your
first
favorite?
Of all, that's I feel
so
I have to I feel I have to fall in love with everybody's story, and really just see the beauty of it. So when I'm doing them, everyone that I'm doing feels like my favorite. I will say one of the more recent ones I did was super duper special to me. It was with Meredith May, who's an author. And she and I have a special connection because her half brother was one of my best friends in high school. And they did not grow up together. She grew up in California with her mom. He grew up here with their dad. And I have learned a lot from her writing because she's written a couple other books about their family dynamic and their family relationships. And so it was really extra special for me to share that. And also because she was so honest about, oh, I made all these mistakes. I had all these assumptions and I was wrong and I had to learn and evolve and adjust. And I just so appreciate anybody who's able to be that honest and that brave. And she's really opened herself up to some criticism about some of the things she did or thought or her actions. And I mean, I just think that that's amazingly brilliant and brave. So that episode is extra special to me.
I actually haven't finished all of it, but I've listened to the majority of it. And I agree. She talks about how she went to a breeder, how it was kind of an impulse thing, how it became competitive. She wanted to get to the dogs before other people who were looking at the dogs got there. She ended up adopting or buying the most difficult dog she's had in her dog owning history, which is a long one. And I think we've all been there. We've all been in moments where we kind of like, we lost sight of what was important. We kind of just like kept going forward. And then we learned a lesson as a result. Not that it was a mistake, because it was probably meant to happen. And a lot of good came from it. But yeah, she did talk about how she was criticized for going to a breeder, and how that was the point she was trying to make. She was trying to make the point that like, you can get, you can go to a breeder, you can go to the shelter. What you get is what you get. And you have to consider that before you adopt any pet, that it may not be perfect and it may take some work. And I know you've worked a ton with rescue. So I want to take a break right now. And when we come back, I want to dig in a little bit deeper into your experience as a rescue advocate, especially in the Baltimore area. So don't go anywhere. I'll be right back with Erin Scott of the Believe in Dog podcast right after this. Welcome back to Covered in Pet Hair. Today, I am speaking to Erin Scott, the host, the creator of the Believe in Dog podcast, which really tells stories about how dogs influence our lives, how they change our lives, how they help us heal, how they teach us things, how they make us better people. And before I get into how dogs have made her a better person through her volunteer work, I actually want to get into a little bit of Baltimore trivia. Ooh. So the second game we're going to play is called Be More First. So I'm going to give you some trivia and you're going to tell me if it's true or false. And this is about Baltimore being the first to do something. So let me know what you think. We'll see how much you know about your home city of Baltimore. All right, the first one is, in 1743, the first professional sports organization in the whole United States was formed in Baltimore. True or false?
True.
Do you know which one it was?
I'm thinking baseball.
It wasn't baseball, the Maryland Jockey Club.
Oh, okay.
Maryland, for those that don't know, has a lot of, horse loving, horse racing, the Preakness and all that. So yes, that actually stood out to me. I'm not big on horse racing, as most animal advocates are not, but it was something that was organized in Maryland. Baltimore is part of U.S. aviation history with the first manned hot air balloon ascent. True or false?
I have no idea.
It is true. Most people might think it's New Mexico because they have the hot air balloon, festival. But it actually, the first time a manned hot air balloon went up was in Baltimore.
Did not know that.
I didn't either until I did this research. Baltimore was the first planned city in North America. True or false?
True.
It's actually false. It was Philadelphia.
Oh.
Yes. All right. Next, in 1816, Baltimore was the first U.S. city to illuminate its streets using hydrogen gas. True or false?
Yes, true.
It is true. It is true. Baltimore is home to one of the first permanent monuments to George Washington. Do you know where, what? Tell us a little bit about it.
Oh, yeah. I used to work right by it.
Oh, cool. Is it in downtown Baltimore?
Yeah, just like a couple blocks north of downtown, on Charles Street.
Nice. All right, awesome. I don't think I've been there before, to be honest with you. I've spent a lot of time downtown Baltimore. Definitely been to an Orioles game. Definitely been to the Inner Harbor, but not sure that I've seen this monument. All right, next one. Yellow pencils were invented in Baltimore. True or false?
That sounds like vaguely true to me, like something I learned in 4th grade, but...
It's false. According to the research I did, they were invented in Chicago.
Okay.
All right, I have two more for you. Baltimore was the first city to erect a statue to Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, that has to be true.
It is true. And who doesn't love Edgar Allan Poe? All right, next one. Since 1949, every year on the night of Poe's birthday, a mysterious stranger in black used to leave a bottle of cognac and 3 roses on his grave.
Yes, absolutely true.
It is true. And just as mysteriously, he or she stopped going in 2009. So that was the last year that somebody did this. They would bring a bottle of cognac and 3 roses to Edgar Allan Poe's grave. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Well, I love that. I love that trivia. That was super cool. So you volunteer with a nonprofit called Be More Dogs. How did you get involved with them, and what kind of work do you do for them as a volunteer?
So it's kind of evolved over the years. Originally, it started out just as kind of like a pro pitbull organization. Pitbulls are super common dogs in Baltimore, and there's a lot of weirdness around having a pit bull sometimes.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. Which I had no idea about when I first, adopted dogs. But when
you first got your female brindle pit bull, you had no idea that people were going to be scared of her.
Yeah, no idea. And I'm like, oh my God, if people met Lucy, like they would fall in love with her. And that was sort of my motivation of finding this. And it was also just to promote like, that, a lot of the early people in Be More Dog, were involved in like agility and dock diving, and just showing, that, pit bull dogs can be, competitive in these sports and great, and putting a face out there.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of like goals in the very beginning of kind of like helping people just kind of be more responsible, keeping your dog in your yard, just things like this. And so we started going out and going to community events and really kind of like hearing what the needs of the community were. And what we really found out was, people had no access to veterinary care in a lot of neighborhoods in Baltimore. Not only just for money, financials is a big thing, but also just transportation. If you have a pit bull dog, you can't get on a city bus to take him to the vet. And just like there are resource deserts and even food deserts where there's areas where people don't have access to a grocery store, there's veterinary deserts. And, there's a lot of people who can't walk down the street. I mean, there's, 10 vet clinics within a 5-mile radius, of me.
In a suburb, sure.
Yeah. Right. But, when you live, in a impoverished neighborhood, that's not the case. So we started doing pop-up veterinary clinics in various neighborhoods throughout Baltimore where people don't have access to veterinary care. So I get to work very closely with the veterinarians, kind of act like as a vet assistant. We've had almost 4,000 dogs come through our clinics over the last, I think it's 11 years now.
Wow.
So I've been right there, for almost all of those, So it's been really special to learn about the needs of the community, to hear the stories of people's dogs. We've been able to dispel a lot of misconceptions. What we really learned was there's a ton of rescue that goes on, in neighborhoods where people don't have access to resources.
Right.
And a lot of people taking in neighbors' dogs, something happens to someone.
Spending money out of their own pocket.
Yeah. I mean, having their dogs eat before they do. These are all common stories that we hear time and time and time again. So it's been super just motivating and just very special, and it has made me a better person and made me realize, just how privileged I am to have what I have, and that I do feel a duty to give back and serve, to help dogs, but also to help people. Because I think what we learned is it's really great if we care about dogs, but we really need to care about people too.
Yes.
So it's been a really special experience to get to do those.
Yes. Absolutely, especially for people who love dogs as fervently as you do, right? You obviously have that connection already. So now you're peers. You're not strangers. Now you're you're connected with that love of dog. So do you have a full-time job, or is the dog world now your full-time job?
No, I do have a day job, yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so what do you do for your day job? Just curious.
I'm a paralegal.
Oh my goodness. Busy.
Oh, yeah.
So you're a paralegal. You have 2 podcasts that you do. You volunteer, it sounds like, very often and very consistently with this organization, Be More Dogs. But you also started the Dog Health Journal. Is that a physical journal that you sell, or is it an online journal?
So right now it's a digital download, but I'm working to get it available to print, which has taken 10 times longer than I ever could have imagined. But I really want it to be, I'm a woman of a certain age. I really like having a physical object that I can write in, like I'm very analog that way, or tactile that way,
Well,
like
you're a paralegal, so you're comfortable with papers. Yes.
Right.
That is awesome. So tell me about how that came to be and what exactly this digital download entails.
So it all started with Penny here. All of my dogs have had at some point or another just like really crazy, complicated health issues that are like not easy to diagnose. And it was actually kind of during the quarantine time that Penny started having a health crisis. And I was trying to keep track of all these different things that we were doing. Like we would be doing like green tea foot soaks one day, and then I mean,
were you both doing the green tea foot soaks or just her?
Just her, but it was like it was a husband and wife effort to try to get this done because she didn't like her feet being touched because her feet had all these sores. And
oh, poor baby.
It was a mess. And then in the middle of all this with her feet, she gets an ear infection. And so I'm trying to keep track of everything that I'm doing, and her medicines are changing. We're doing herbs. We work with a holistic vet. So, we're doing a lot of different things, and she's asking for a lot of information. And I was trying to find, like, there's got to be a way to keep track of all this stuff that I'm doing. And I couldn't find what I was looking for. And I started trying to just create something for myself, like in Canva, like, how am I going to keep track of all we're doing? And in the middle of all this, like, she gets this ear infection. We have very common ear medication that, you put right down in their ears. And fortunately, it was during quarantine, so I was home. And the next day, we start this medicine on like a Saturday, Sunday. So now it's Monday, and the mailman comes, and she slept right through it. And normally she gives him the business when he comes up. And I'm like, that's really weird, because they bang the mailbox is right outside our front door. So it bangs, and she starts barking. And I'm like, that's like, she's never slept through the mailman. Like, that's strange. And then like I had to run out somewhere. I come home, she's asleep right by the front door, and she doesn't wake up when I came in. And I'm like, I dropped down like, oh my God, what's wrong? And, and then she kind of wakes up like, oh, you're home. And I start realizing like she didn't hear me. And I'm looking, and I look at all my notes in my journal, and I'm like, we just started an ear medicine. Like, could this be affecting her hearing? So I text our vet, and she calls me back like 2 minutes later, like, oh my God, stop the medicine. Because in like this small percentage of dogs, it's like 0.5%, they can develop, it's called an ototoxicity reaction that destroys their hearing. And can cause them to go deaf. So luckily we caught it very, very quickly. And she did eventually get some of her hearing back. She's not totally deaf, but it's definitely not like it used to be. So that's when I'm like, I need to get
routine ear infection medicine.
Yeah. That everybody has probably used at some point. Yeah.
And that is terrifying. And what's scary is that our dogs can't tell us. Like,
right.
I can't hear out of this ear, right? Like my kids could even say at this point, being like, something's wrong with my ear. It might take a minute to figure out what it is, but your dog can't tell you anything about, and you have to wait until there's a physical manifestation of the symptom. And thankfully you were home and you saw that, but you're right. How scary that like it could have completely taken her hearing.
Yeah. So I felt really fortunate. So that's when I started realizing, like, could this journal help somebody else? Like, maybe there's somebody else out here who's like, I was thinking of like, maybe your dog has cancer, maybe your dog has allergies. You're doing like food trials, where you're trying all different foods to see how they react to things. And so I was like, I need to get this in some kind of format where it could help somebody. So I have, there's like daily pages that help you keep track of everything that you're doing each day. And then I have a vet visit page, which is like one of my favorite things, because you go to the vet, like, this is me, going to the vet stresses me out. I'm always like afraid I'm gonna forget something. Right.
Yes.
I've been driving halfway home and realized I forgot to get this refilled. I forgot to ask this question. They're telling me a bunch of stuff. And then it's like, all you get is a copy of the receipt with the charges. And then a year from now, you're like, wait, what did I take her to the vet for? Like, what was this
exactly.
for? And so I was like, I want a way to keep track of everything, make sure I ask all my questions. And so I have this great template to help you with going to the vet, remembering all your questions, remembering your refills, your follow-ups, taking your notes.
Gosh. I need one of those for me and my kids.
Right. And then there's also kind of like a chart to kind of help you keep track of your vet visits. So that way, like, what was really helpful for us with Penny, right, is what we found out was she had like 4 courses of antibiotics in 1 year, and it had really destroyed her gut health. But I didn't realize that until I put it all down on paper that she had done all this. So I think it's important, to keep track for these purposes too. So that's kind of like the different parts of the journal. And I have all these different versions I want to come out with, like this is really intense, but I want like one that's a little easier, for if your dog's not having like a crisis, so you can just keep track. So I have like 18 different versions in my head.
I would like to recommend a diagnosis journal, because, for example, February of 2021, my dog Titan was diagnosed with degenerative myelopathy. That is what the veterinarian said he had. She still thinks he has that. I'm not convinced that he has that. I've done a ton of other things since to like check his genetic, mutations that would, make him a candidate for even having that. He doesn't have that genetic mutation. I've done a ton of research. I kind of like biohacked him a little bit,
That's
like when
amazing.
I found out because there's nothing you can do for these conditions, right? Cancer, degenerative myelopathy. These things are going to take your dog at some point, unless your dog is really young and maybe resilient. Degenerative myelopathy doesn't matter the age. It will take your dog. It's a degenerative nerve disease, and they lose all control of their body. Whether they're 6 or 15 when they're diagnosed, it doesn't matter. They will go. And so I have no idea, and I have a lot of ideas of what I've done in the past like year and a half to keep him here. He is still here. We celebrated his 15th birthday in July.
Amazing.
We had a quinceañera for him, which was really fun.
I love it.
But seriously, like when I look back, I'm like, I don't know all the things that I did. And I wish I did. I wish I had started a journal. So a diagnosis journal. Where
that's my chart. Yeah, that's my chart.
Today my dog was diagnosed with this, and these are all the things I'm going to do for this diagnosis. And
I'll send it to you, see if it helps you.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I love that idea. I think getting organized. I'm a big organization person. Like all day long, I'm constantly watching organization videos. I love organization porn, as they call it, where like somebody takes like a super messy room and makes it. But I think we need to get organized with medical things as well, because like you said, like we forget how often our pets are being medicated. Even our veterinarians have a hard time keeping up because they're not always super, I guess, like focused on what was happened before. They're looking at the medical condition right now and what has to happen. But if you're like, well, they were just on antibiotics 6 weeks ago, what do we do next instead? Or is there something I should do simultaneously? It opens up these conversations that can make a huge difference. So I love that idea. I love it so much. So what do you think? Last question, is the biggest challenge that dog owners, dog guardians, dog parents face today?
I think it is related to their health care. Because I host the Alternative Dog Moms podcast. I'm a raw feeder. I do a lot of holistic alternative measures. I think there's a lot of things that we can do. And I think that the veterinary industry has become very corporatized. And that's not always to the benefit of our dogs, it's to the benefit of corporations.
Right.
I'm a little cynical with that stuff.
Yeah, no, same.
So I think it takes a certain amount of being willing to go outside the box and look for some other answers. And, I'm always happy to provide any direction I can to anybody who's dealing with something like that. There's a lot of alternatives that are out there. There's a lot of people who are doing amazing work out there. Mm-hmm. They might not be the vet that's right down the street from your house, but there's a ton of people out there who are really working to keep dogs healthy. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and the average pet parent doesn't have the access like you and I do, being in the industry, to all these people, right? Like we are basically like the curators of these resources, right? You interview people that have great stories to tell. I interview people who are doing fun things in the industry. We inevitably end up stumbling across veterinarians that are really inspirational or product manufacturers that are changing things around. But like your average pet parent doesn't have that access. I just went to Super Zoo and I met so many people and learned about so many brands that are not only doing better for our pets, but also for the environment, that are sourcing things more responsibly. And the average pet parent just doesn't know about those. So it's important that people like you and I kind of become that connection. So tell us in that vein, tell us how my audience can learn more about you and follow you and learn more of your recommendations.
Yes, well, definitely listen to the Believe in Dog podcast and the Alternative Dog Moms. That's where we really geek out on health and wellness and everything we're doing with our dogs, and bring in some of the people who are doing some of the most cutting edge things in the, veterinary health world. Like you said, the Believe in Dog is a little more heart centered, is always my hope, but with people who have really inspirational stories, whether it's starting a company, starting a nonprofit, leaving a corporate job to, work with dogs full time, goals.
Yes.
But and then I'm on Instagram at Believe in Dog Podcast with underscores between each word. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you. And if somebody has a health problem, like I'm always happy to help you, point them in the right direction, share the resources that I have. I live for that stuff.
Absolutely. And just a shout out to Kimberly Gauthier. She is your co-host on the Alternative Dog Moms podcast. She was a guest on Covered in Pet Hair.
Oh,
I'll link the video to her interview up here so you guys can get to know her too. Yeah, you guys are a great match. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I just want to propose a toast to you, to Tim, to all the puppies that you have impacted. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much.
I also want to propose a toast to our executive producer, Mark Winter. Thank you, Mark. And to our audience for tuning in with all of these awesome guests that I get to bring to you. So thank you for being my audience. Thank you for following all of our guests and supporting us in this endeavor to get more people informed of all the good things that are out there for your pets. So cheers to you. Here's to a life covered in pet hair, because there's no better way to live. Cheers. To learn more about Covered in Pet Hair, please visit coveredinpethair.com or petliferadio.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.